Can you hear me okay? Everybody hear me okay? Um, if my wife would be quiet in the back, can she hear me okay? Well, thank you all for coming out here today. I don't have a whole, most of you have been here before, so I don't have a whole lot new to say at the beginning of this, of what's happened over the since my last one a month ago. I guess the big thing is, we held our public safety forum Wednesday night, and through October, our crime stats are almost exactly the same as a year ago. So about flat, except our violent crime is down, particularly assaults. Usually, so half of our assaults are on police officers that we have. But we're still so we'll still be the number one in the state for lowest violent crime rate for towns over 50,000. As you may have seen earlier this year, we're out of 360 suburbs in the country, the largest 360 suburbs in the country. We're number 2 for lowest property crime rate and number 5 for lowest violent crime rate. So our police department does a great job. But we did have a forum. If you want to see some of the tips and some of the stuff we talked about there, about retail shopping, that type of thing. I mean, the biggest thing, obviously we place a high emphasis on Orland Square Mall all the time, but particularly this time of year, a lot of emphasis there. Traffic was up Black Friday, so last weekend. Black Friday weekend traffic was up at the mall 15%. So the mall's doing extremely well. I just actually this week, I was at the Orland Park Chamber event, and I know Bonefish is the number one in the entire chain, entire country. Seasons 52 just opened, and he said they're already number one in the Midwest region for number of diners and number of reservations. That includes Oak Brook and Woodfield, and the restaurant here is smaller than theirs, so they're doing fantastic. Just a lot of good things happening in Orland Park that way. Obviously, Steinhoff was open, which is a big deal as well. So I know the question will come up: Pete's Fresh Market. Last I heard, January or February. They're still waiting. They have back orders on some cabinetry and stuff, and I'm thinking, man, Wild Fork got all of theirs. But wherever they get their stuff, so for some of their cases, that's been back ordered. So, and then of course they have a mad scramble over like 4 days to stock the whole store. So since it is groceries, but January, February, I'm sure they don't want to do it in December right before Christmas because it's hard enough to get people. So.
Did they build a warehouse in Howard Avenue? Where Kmart is? Aren't they putting a warehouse there?
Yeah, they're putting a warehouse there, but I'm not sure what that has to do with Orland Park, though.
Oh, so you need to stack the store at the warehouse.
A few more miles to get the trucks here. I don't know that is the big issue. The big issue is that I think December, they don't want to have to try and hire people over Christmas, right? So, anyways, they were waiting on cabinetry. So that's probably the big stuff that has happened since the last meeting. I guess the other thing we had, which was before the last meeting, but I'll repeat it anyways. We got the 2022 audit done, which we knew was getting done. That firm wasn't hired until May because we had to fire the last one for being so late. The issues you have when you have a late audit. 2021 was late, that was the problem. And the problem we had there was basically the audit firm got acquired, and the new audit firm that acquired them stopped doing the work. And so you're kind of stuck, because if you push them too hard, all they have to do is write a couple of sentences in the audit and it makes the village look bad. On the other hand, if you fire an audit firm and then try and bring in a new one, now you've got to go through that whole process. So anyways, long and short of it, we got the 2021 done. We fired them immediately. We went out for RFP, so that was in December. And went out for RFP in January. RFPs take 90 days, so and then you have to interview everybody. So we went under contract in mid to late May with Sikich in the RFP, actually, it said we wanted the first one done in 2022, done in 4 months, which is really fast for a first audit of something as large as we have, and then 2023 done by the end of the year. So they were actually 1 month late with 2022, which is not surprising given the volume of stuff they have to go through with a first audit. There's a lot of things an audit firm has to do the first time when they haven't seen your books. Plus, we had a data conversion from an old system, so there was a lot of issues with that too, making sure that stuff was right. But anyways, long and short of it, November audit was done. It was clean. Chris, you could play the video of our auditor.
To the statutory reporting deadlines that you're subject to. Within the financial section, the independent auditor's report, pleased to present to the board that we've been able to issue a clean, unmodified opinion on the December 31st, 2022 financial statements. As a reminder, that clean, unmodified opinion is the highest level of assurance to auditors that we can provide. It means, in our opinion, those financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles.
There you go. So that's basically what they presented to us. There were more details there, but at the end of the day, the audit was clean, which we knew it would be. But the 2023 audit will be done late February, early March. We're trying to push them to get that one done as well, obviously. And actually, believe it or not, the people whose fiscal years ended like ours, December 31st of last year, 2023, their audits didn't become late until December 1st because there's an automatic extension right now coming from the comptroller's office. So ours technically wasn't even late at that point. 2023 wasn't late yet, but it is now. Because they're just, bottom line is there's not enough auditors to go around. So it's a shortage in the whole industry. So, anyway, so we expect that one to be clean as well. And the firm is going to, continue to do their job since they've been done with the first one, and they were already working on the second one while they were cleaning up the first one. So that's all done. The other big thing that they did is we had asked them to do, we had directed them to do, and Trustee Radishevsky's here, but the board directed them, the triangle TIF, everyone who's lived here knows that's been a disaster. It's supposed to have been developed, it was never developed. The way a TIF works is the development's supposed to pay for all the infrastructure. Well, we have a big debt still from the TIF. And so we said, hey, I know that in the past, they've been paying the TIF from other funds. I want a full accounting of the TIF to know where everything that was transferred in from our general fund over the years to pay for the loans, the bonds, all that stuff. And the auditor recommended that we write off the TIF debt of $47 million. By writing it off, it doesn't mean we don't pay it. It means that it's no longer the TIF. It is not reasonable to think that the TIF is going to pay off in 2 years $47 million in debt. So basically, that debt is transferred to the general fund. So essentially, we got what we have there. They spent $150 million, and played developer, lost $47 million of our money. That's basically where we're at. So we're stuck with that. We have to deal with it as taxpayers, as a board. Believe me, no one's less happy about it than me, because I've been trying to deal with it for 8 years. And there were other things that made it challenging to redevelop it as well, because they had right of first refusal with the apartment company. So any developer that came in here, the apartment guys could basically block it. So none of the developers wanted to do anything until that right of first refusal was over. So we couldn't even get developers in here until 21 or 2022. So essentially, the good news is we do have a development. It was approved. It is no new residential, so it's retail, it's restaurants, it's office space and entertainment. So that's what's going to go down in that space. So, that should break ground next year. Well, will break ground next year, because that was the other thing. It wasn't just $47 million. The village is also on the hook to build another metro lot. That was an agreement made back in like 04, 05. And then we also have to spend about $3.5 million to $4 million moving utilities, because when they put utilities through, they ran them. We all own property. Where are your utility easements? down the edges of your property, they're not right through the middle. And these were run right through the middle. So now we got to move those around everything, and that's another 3.5 or $4 million. So really the loss there is probably about $55 million. It's a sunk cost. We can't do anything about it except move forward, and that's what we're doing. So see what else is going on that's happened in the last few years. Oh, we did approve the property tax levy. It's not the final approval, but it can't be any higher than what we approved. And so we did cut the property tax levy, not by a lot so far, 1%, but still down. So it's 2 years in a row, and 3 out of the last 5, we've been able to lower the property tax levy. And no other taxing body's been able to do that. So that's about all I have. I do have to grab a Kleenex here, I think. So what questions, thank you. What questions do you have for me? I'll open it up to questions and whatever you guys want to talk about. Maybe not Don, because he has like 6 of them.
Yeah. All right. Any audit, it was clean, the balance of money is going to, did they issue any other red flags for the village?
No, it was
So like you talked about, the tip money, they said,
well, it's not a it's not a,
that's something that's, that's flag that need to be fixed. Were there any other red flags that they stated?
no, it was a clean audit.
Well, I know it's a claim, but sometimes there's other things.
Yeah, they said there were some, yeah, you want to grab the mic so we can go to the next person and I'll answer the question? So they also said that we had some internal control issues, which we knew about. We knew about with the ERP system interchange, that there were issues with that. And they also said that that those things have already been fixed and they don't expect to see that in 2023. But the audit was clean, there were no issues, and that they recommend writing off the $47 million. Our CPA on the board, Bill Healy, had asked the auditors in 2019, he goes, why aren't we writing this off? There's no way we're ever going to collect this money. And that for whatever reason, at the time, they said they shouldn't do that. Well, the new firm said you absolutely should do this. And so that's what they did. And basically what it just means is it's out of the TIF fund and it's in the general fund. So if you think about it, we have $83 million of debt right now. 47 million of it on the books is from that project. So it dates back to, and all of that money was spent before any of us, including me, I'm the longest serving person on the board right now, were ever on the board. So.
I'm Jim Vanek, 25-year resident, 30-year.
Okay.
I live on 82nd Avenue over by Sandbox. Anyway, Mayor, my wife and I both drive electric cars. And I know that years ago, we used to have an option to either buy our electric through ComEd or the village negotiated a rate. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I've been watching our electric bill for 16 years. If anybody ever wants, a history of electric in this place, do we currently have a?
So we look at that every year, and some years the advisor, so basically the board, follows the advice of, and they look at the forward-looking prices and everything. And so last year, I think the last couple of years, ComEd was lower than what the other places were offering. And the couple of years before that, the only reason the other places were lower as a whole is because they were giving us incentives and paying for some infrastructure things and things like that. So this year, I think we were pretty sure it's still ComEd this year. We talked about it 2 months ago, and I'm pretty sure it's ComEd again is still showing lower than those other buyers.
An interesting tidbit, if you look at the bill, it'll say that we're paying 6-point-some cents a kilowatt hour. By the time you get through taxes and government and stuff, we're paying almost 15 cents a kilowatt hour.
Well, at the end of the day, though, I look at our electric bills and our gas bills, and I look at them compared to, I guess when I first started paying electric and gas bills, 40 years ago, and relative to other costs that we have, our energy costs have not really climbed nearly as much as, in my little apartments, I was paying probably half as much as I'm paying today on my big house. So, I try to keep that in perspective that, yeah, the bills are big, but at the end of the day, relative to what they were 40 years ago, the inflation on electric and gas has been a much less, and if you're fortunate enough to have, most of us have natural gas heat. Natural gas heat is just so much cheaper than electric. And if you don't believe that, just have a pond like I do, and I spent one season trying to heat it to keep the ice from forming, and saw my electric bills double over the winter. And I'm like, for one little heater. And I said, oh, I don't think we'll do that anymore. So I found, use the pump to agitate it now so it doesn't freeze over, and just keep an eye on it. But yeah, but that's so we do look at that every year, and it just so happens, I think the last 2 or 3 comment has been the.
Our monthly usage is actually the lowest as it is, and we've had electric cars for 4 years. The biggest impact on lowering the bills was changing all the bulbs in the house over to LEDs.
Yeah, LEDs have a huge impact. I know most of us probably have LEDs because you can't even get the others. And especially now that LEDs aren't just the bright white lights, you can actually get soft lights that look like, that aren't bright and white like this, which, is, I don't know, for my home, I guess in some places I like the bright white, but most of it I like, I think most of us like the softer incandescent, and now you can get that. So, but I definitely suggest, most of our buildings have been converted, if not all of them. And the nice thing about that is we got rebates to do that as well. So that's why we sped up the process. So Sportsplex, and you think about that, for us to switch to LEDs, you got to switch fixtures. It's not just the bulb. It's, in your house, it might just be the bulb, but for us, it's fixtures. So there's a lot that has to go into that. So we've done that at pretty much every building. Any other questions? You can wait. There's got to be someone else with a question.
My name is Lynn Gunner, and I'm from Centennial Village. From Centennial Village.
Okay.
I was wondering, years ago, they were talking about putting a stop sign at Ravinia and West Avenue because a lot of people trying to avoid LaGrange Road come down Ravinia. And I was just wondering if there's who I would contact.
There is a stop sign at Ravinia and West Avenue.
Pardon me?
It is, but it is only on west going on to.
Yes, and we will not make it a 3-way because Ravinia is what we would call, it's not one of our major arteries, but it's a minor artery. And so it's designed to actually relieve traffic off of LaGrange Road. So we're not going to put a stop sign there. Then you would have a backup. Before the roundabout went in front of the Village Hall, the backup sometimes were 30 cars. So there, yeah, but that's not going to happen. So the T intersection, what she's talking about is the T intersection of Ravinia and West Avenue. Ravinia is a through street. West Avenue is a T intersection. We do not need a 3-way stop there. And I'm not aware of any, I'm sure there has been one, but not really aware of any traffic incidents at that place. We do track our traffic incidents, and that's not an intersection that we have any issues with.
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning.
Rick Boss and Linda Boss. We live in Deer Point Estates.
Okay.
I drive a 1500 series pickup truck.
Okay.
And in the parkways, even in subdivisions or going on to main arteries, tree branches are so low, you cannot see cars coming until you're almost in the street.
So it's the homeowner's responsibility
To trim the parkway.
trim the branches to 14 feet, just like that's to maintain the grass. If you see a place where it's blocking the vision or it's too low where your car is hitting it, that then contact our public works or through the 311 system, they'll create a work ticket. Well, not a work ticket. First thing they'll do is they'll go out and talk to the homeowner and say you need to do this. And then if the homeowner doesn't, then we'll go out and take care of it, but then pass the bill on to the homeowner. So, and then we do go through with our snow trucks, and if we see a branch here and there, we will go through and clean up a branch here and there. But then people are mad because my tree didn't get trimmed right. It's like, well, we're removing the one. We're not trimming your whole tree. So that's your responsibility. So, and I think we also are working on a program where we have tree companies lined up that will, with some discounted rates for Parkway trees. Yeah, so for the county road, that's, you contact us, and it's a county road, we will contact the county to come take care of it. Or sometimes we'll take care of it ourselves, but sometimes when we take care of something for the county or the state, then they'll blame us for some other problem that happened there. So, but we do contact IDOT and we do contact the county if there's anything that's blocking vision and that kind of stuff. So just, you know, obviously we can't police 22 square miles. So we are driven largely by resident complaints and residents seeing something that's out there. But if residents do say something, we do go out and take care of it. And usually gets taken care of within a day or two. So under most cases, yeah.
This is more of a general question, but Santa, all the kids are making their wish list for Santa. What's our wish list for Orland Park for the next, let's say, 3 years?
To be in a more fiscally responsible state. That would be probably my biggest wish list. I mean, ultimately, you know, the state is, I heard it yesterday at an event, and I heard how great the state was doing financially. I'm like, I guess you must be ignoring the $4 billion hole we have this year. And it was a state person talking about it, and they ignore the fact that they were just shoveled money from COVID till now. We're just shoveled money to cover our budget, and the state's budget went, I think, from $38 billion to $55 billion in the last 5 years, and it's just not sustainable. And and the other thing is historically back to 1967, the state shared 10% of its income tax collections with municipalities. Since the day income tax was put in, that was the deal cut with municipalities. And the idea behind that was the municipalities won't put their own income tax in, like mostly Chicago. And it's per capita. So do we get every dime we put in? No. You know, does say a Harvey or Posen get a little higher percentage than what they put in? For sure. But it's still a pretty sizable amount of money. And back in 2011, the state was having so much trouble, they cut that to like 5.4%, so about half. Then under Bruce Rauner, it started to climb back up. They started to restore it, and it was up to 8. And then when Pritzker came back in, they cut it back down below 6. Now it's up to 6.4, I think, because the mayors across the state have been fighting for this. To put it in perspective, since 2011, we've lost, including this year now, $57 million in funding. So you think about that. Think about that $57 million. Think about the $47 million in the triangle, right? It's $104 million. Our unfunded capital when we did our 5-year capital plan that we had to figure out how to fund was $110 million. Basically, it would have been funded had we been given that money. So it's a big hit. It's like a $7.5 million hit this year to our budget, not having that. If it was fully 10%, so that would be the biggest thing is if the state would restore that, and the state, it would cost them shy of $1 billion a year. Think how much better that money would be spent by the municipalities if they had that for local roads and for all these other things than the state.
I read someplace that there's 132 municipalities that are either in, aside from Chicago, that are either in or touch Cook County.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest counties in the country. I think second or third biggest. So.
Mayor, the town continues to grow exponentially, and if you drive around, there's so much more growth, so much more land that seems that can grow. What do you see as you go into your next term and beyond? How much more can Orland grow from a population standpoint, from a business at the center standpoint? What are some of the positives moving forward? What are some of the threats? How much can Orland Park be, and is that a good thing?
So there's a lot in that question. So it'll be a long answer. It'll be a long answer. So Population-wise, 2010 to 2020, we only grew about 1,500 people. We didn't grow a lot, but we grew, and the state's been hemorrhaging people, and the county's been really hemorrhaging people, right? So that's good. So we're doing really well. Yeah, from a jobs perspective, I looked at it last week or 2 weeks ago. Since I took office, we've actually added 5,000 jobs in Orland Park. So just looking at our job total. So our economy, as far as businesses, is it's going extremely well. And that includes businesses like Silver Cross, Von Mauer, all of those things, right? And of course, they replaced other businesses, but the total employment from that time, from early 2017 till now, that's what it is. So we've been doing extremely well. We probably can only grow 20%, maybe more. We're probably 75 to 80% built out. The big areas that we have to grow are along Wolf Road, between Wolf and Will Cook. That's all owned by Gallagher and Henry, who doesn't seem to have any interest in selling to anybody. So you're a little bit stuck with that. Same thing along the I-80 corridor. You have one landowner. That's one of the challenges. Sometimes it's good when there's one landowner because you can deal with one person. Sometimes it's not so good because there's nothing to play off one another. And if they're just not, hey, you're going to pay my price, and people are like, well, that's 4 times the market. I go, I don't care, because they lease it out for farming, and then it's the taxes are dirt cheap, so they just sit on it, right? So you have all of that along I-80. So the big area that we have to develop for the future, from from what I would say is kind of an office perspective or light manufacturing, is really that I-80 corridor is where we have a lot to do. We also have an area, if you think Will Cook West along Southwest Highway, between that and I-80, it's the only place, Orland Park's the only one that can service that 300-acre property between that and Willow Run Golf Course. We're the only ones that can service it, so there'll probably be some growth in there, but that's a really hard property to develop. There's a lot of wetland there. It's also inexpensive. So there's a real opportunity potentially. We did have a data center user there, which would be a fantastic use because not a lot of traffic, and it would have been a great use there, and it would spur other development. But that fell through mostly because ComEd was difficult. And the developer then wanted to bait and switch and go to the I-80 corridor, and I said, I'm not filling the entire I-80 corridor with data centers for 50 jobs. If it's a swampland area, it makes sense, right? They wanted to do that because there's already tension lines there, and they could have got the power right away. But also, they would have never got, I can tell you, they would have never got the landowner to sell for the price they were looking for. Probably 10 times higher than what the price they were looking for. But, so those are but those are long-term, okay? I think what's important for the village is to recognize the village will be here long after we're all gone. And if we do bad things, the people who are here long after we're gone are stuck with them and having to fix them. Example, the Triangle, right? We had, my predecessor, his board, they decided to play developer on, they played developer with our money. They lost $47 million plus the $8 million or so I told you we still have to do. That's yes, that strip center was old, and you had a lumber company and you had a concrete company, but as businesses, their lives end at some point. Something would have taken its place, and somebody would have looked to develop that, right? Us using eminent domain to force people to sell, paying off businesses to move that we liked and pay them a lot of money and pay the other ones, not so much. That's not something government should do. So we have to be careful about, just jumping on anything, right? So what am I worried about? I worry about our retail corridor. We have to protect the core of 143rd to 167th or so in LaGrange. That has to be protected. 159th has to be protected because the outlying strip centers, we all know retail has shrunk. I don't know that retail is going to shrink much more. I think that COVID kind of spurred the e-commerce to where it's at, and it may be kind of leveling out now. So I don't know that retail is going to shrink much more, but there's a lot of big boxes that don't need to be that big. Stores that are big boxes are going smaller, but some big boxes are actually they have ideas that are bigger, right? So and we have just about every big box store there is. but we have to protect the core of, because that's what brings the traffic here, right? And I know my predecessor hated the mall, wanted the mall to go away. Multiple times he said, I hate that our downtown area is the mall, and he actually told the mall he wanted them to tear it down and build an outdoor lifestyle center with townhomes and all that. I can tell you right now, if you did that, those townhomes would be apartments, and what would have happened? You tell me, anyone here, tell me a town that lost a mall and thrived. I can't think of one anywhere. You think St. Charles thrived compared to where it was? It's recovering now, but yeah, and I guess if you find me the river that we have that we can build around the river, but you find me one in the country where a town has, thrived after a mall, when the mall is 10% of our 10% of our economy directly, 40% or more indirectly. It's the number 1 traffic mall in the country, right? So we have to protect that. The good news is it's doing great. The Sears, the owner, the people who bought the Sears, we're not thrilled with that. We're still trying to work through that. There's no way, the stuff that they're looking to do, and I'm going to say this again, I hope they're watching, the stuff they're looking to do, there is no way the board will ever support. So, and we have people that are interested in that property, leasing from them, and or buying from them. They don't seem to be interested. So again, private property owner, there's only so much you can do. I know that the mall has also told them, we won't let you connect to us if so with their ideas. So basically they want to do an upscale flea market. Not going to happen. Okay? So, and we have control over that, so it's never going to happen. So that's the only thing that's not leased or being prepared for that's in the entire mall. So the mall's doing great. The areas surrounding the mall's doing great. You got Portillo's going in there. Obviously Wild Fork went in. So you're seeing a lot of that redevelopment. So we have to protect the core. But then what does that leave you? It leaves you with strip centers, right? And we know like the one behind Lover's Lane has struggled, right? There's other ones that are doing well. The Jewel was struggling for a long time until Aldi went in, and now it's all of a sudden it's doing great, over on 179th and Wolf. So every one of those strip centers has a unique story. We actually talked about this at our last EDAB, Economic Development Advisory Board meeting in November, and staff has been tasked over the next few months, 3 to 4 months, is to identify all of our strip centers, what's their lease rate in them, which ones are vacant, which ones aren't. And then for the ones that are vacant, why are they vacant? Because it's different for every one of them. Riviera is vacant because it's not in a great spot for commercial. The fitness center is dated, old, and I don't care what they put into it, it's probably never not going to be dated and old, right? So what's the right answer there, if you ask me, is probably townhomes. It probably is what fits there. It's probably the highest, best use for that property. Andrew is there's another vacant property, it's not a strip center, but there's another property with a different answer, right? So every strip center is going to have and some of them are just, they haven't invested in, they look old, they look dated, and if they updated them, they'd be fine. You think of like 151st and West Avenue, where the Kismet and all that is. It's rented, but it could use a refresh, right? If it had a refresh, they'd probably do a little better, right? So those are the kinds of things. And Coach's Corner is another one over on, at 82nd Avenue, right? That's like has a 25% vacancy all the time, but everything else seems to do fine. So there's individual stories that we have to understand and see what we can do to help with that. Because a lot of those strip centers, as things, congregate around LaGrange Road and on the core, some of those strip centers will go away, and we have to figure out what the best use of that is. Is it office space? Is it housing? Is it, what is it? So it will vary by each one. And then some of them have been dead for a while, and then all of a sudden they get the right tenant, and it takes off.
So the strip center on 151st over by Shady Funeral Home, they did a complete,
And now it's rented.
facelift.
Yeah, and it's rented.
It looks great.
Yeah.
And new businesses are going in, there was just a new dentist that just went in, pediatric dentist, and so on and so forth, and that's, I think,
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it depends on the owner. A lot of the owners own these buildings outright, and so they're not paying any mortgage on it, and they don't want to invest in it. They're older. So it really just depends on who owns the various pieces. But that's kind of the things we're looking for going forward. But we're in a great spot. I mean, we've added 5,000 jobs. We've got a lot more businesses wanting to come here. You know, we have people that want to go into that Sears vacancy, which is really the only big vacancy we have. You know, anyone who's been in the Steinhoffels, I mean, even if you're not looking to buy furniture, you go there and you'll be awed. And I'm sure Darvin's isn't happy, but it seems like, just like our auto row, they all go up together. I mean, if you live in Illinois, you can literally go park in Orland Park Place and you can hit everything except IKEA, right? You can do Steinhoffels, you can do Darvin's, you can do Kirkland's, you can do Ashley Furniture, and there's more as well. So, I mean, you have all these places they can go to in one spot. And so that's like the auto row is the same thing, is that all the dealers are in one spot. People go shopping at once. We have the #1 auto row in the state, and I'm pretty sure we're gonna have the #1 furniture row in the state too. So it seems like a rising tide. They all wanna be together. It's like restaurants. They group together, they all do better.
When you say protect that corridor, what does that entail? What does that keep it?
Well, I mean, it's got to stay vibrant, right? That corridor has to stay vibrant. I mean, if the mall doesn't stay vibrant, the town starts to decline. I mean, and so it's really important. It was really important to get the Toys R Us redeveloped, right, with something. Not to have those vacancies sitting there staring you in the face when you're coming down LaGrange Road. If they're in the strip center, yeah, we deal with it as residents, but the person coming to the town doesn't look at that as your town is declining, right? And a lot of those strip centers are your hairdressers and your stuff that kind of just deals with the neighborhood around it, right? So like I said, each of those strip centers will have their own story. But if the mall, Orland Park Place, 143rd to the 163rd, if that starts to die, nothing else survives. So it's really, really important. That's why when we lost, I mean, I was 10 months into the job and we lost Carson's, Sears, Carson's Home Good, Toys R Us, and Babies R Us in the same month, right? And by September that year, we had Von Mauer coming in. Another year later, we had the Toys R Us being filled. Binny's went over to the Babies R Us site. And the Carson's Home Goods, not occupied yet, but it actually has been approved for a project a year and a half ago, but then it turned out there was a right of first refusal, so there's some contract crap going on there. I'd love to see it get occupied. It's a self-storage, and what's nice is part of the project is they have to redo all that landscaping and refresh it, which will be nice. The other thing is, if you think about that parking lot with the gym and gizmos and and what's there, the parking lot's packed. Well, self-storage is a perfect use because it doesn't take much parking. Just a few people there at a time. So it was actually a pretty good fit for that. Looking forward to it actually getting done it's a contract squabble between the building, the owners. Apparently the folks that own the rest of the building had a right of first refusal, and anyways, above the village's ability to handle. Yeah.
Do you have any updates on the Andrew Court property and the PD's 2 property? Are there any updates?
Yeah, so Andrew Corporation and PD's 2, both, we were talking before the meeting, both of those properties, you may have seen in the news, there's someone running, well, actually I think both groups are probably going to be talking about how, we're putting in TIFs. First off, that TIF that we did was a failure, okay? A lot of TIFs are successful. That TIF was a failure because of how it was handled and the things that were done. It was like a laundry list of case study of what not to do, okay? A TIF is a great development tool if done right. Because what a TIF does, actually, why don't you play and then I'll answer your question, but we're gonna play this. I know some of you have seen this video a few times, but this explains what a TIF is. And you can go past the whole downtown Orland part of it and just go to what is a TIF.
Seeking to finally home the long-standing vision for the area, at the May 2nd, 2022 Village Board meeting, the Village Board approved TIF, or Tax Increment Financing, is an economic development tool used to boost economic growth and create jobs by allowing developers to pursue developments that they normally wouldn't if they had to fund the projects on their own. TIF districts are created for 3 reasons. Number 1, the local government does not have the funds needed to revitalize the property. Number 2, developers are hesitant to invest because redevelopment costs would exceed property values. And number 3, without action, the surrounding areas are at risk of decay and an eroding tax base. Once the TIF is approved, the annual property tax increases in the district are frozen at their current level. The increment above the frozen level is then used to pay off the financing over time. The development
Pause
will
that for a
increase the
second.
property value with
So does everybody understand that? So essentially, the property taxes are kept at their current level, and all the taxing bodies are paid that same level for the entire duration of the TIF. But new development is going to be valued higher. So they'll pay higher property taxes. That difference gets to be used to pay for the infrastructure. That's what was supposed to happen at 143rd and LaGrange. But when you don't develop anything, or you put in a non-for-profit, you don't get any property tax, you don't get that difference. So you'll hear, and this will talk about, but you'll hear the schools go, oh, we're losing money. The schools don't lose any money. Okay, they're waiting 20 years to get the development money out of there, but they're not losing anything. They're getting the same thing they were always getting. And the reason that we use that tool is because the developer can't do the project the best project for the site, back to what they said, the developer's gonna pay more in costs than what the property is gonna be valued at. So the TIF rules have certain things you can spend the money on. You can spend it basically on public infrastructure, so roads, drainage, those types of things. So there's very strict laws about what it can be used for. It just can't be used for anything. So, and if a TIF's done right, when you're done, it can pay everything off early, so you can close it early, so everyone can start getting their tax money, or it'll have extra money in it that gets split out to the taxing bodies based on their different proportions.
Just a question on it. Is it like what Flossmoor or Homewood did with the downtown where the village pays for businesses?
I don't know how they set that up, but it could be, yes. It is what Tinley did across the street from where Sam's Club is, and redeveloped that area right there. It's what they did to redevelop that area along Harlem. So it's what we did, actually. So we have two examples of TIFs in Orland. One is the Triangle, which is a case study, like I said, in what not to do. It's been a disaster. We also have Orland Park Place. Orland Park Place was a TIF. It was a dead mall. They TIF'd it. They got all of this stuff done, and then they ended the TIF early and gave money. Actually, the taxing body said, no, keep the TIF going, because it was generating so much, it was piling up so much money for them. And we basically said, here's your cash out, and we closed the TIF and just put it back on the tax rolls. So there's two examples of. Well, what it does is, like for the Triangle project that they're planning on doing, it needs, and I'm going from memory here, I could be off. I think to build all the stuff they want to build and do all the infrastructure and do all the improvements, which is really nice. It's like $32 million it needs in assistance to do all that stuff to make a reasonable profit, okay? Not a crazy profit, but something that the banks would loan against, okay? Well, if we don't do that, then we'll get a strip mall, right? We won't get, the rooftop restaurants and the things that we're looking to do. So, so there's a clause, and it's going to talk about this, but there's what they call but for the TIF, the project, it wouldn't get developed, right? So I'll keep playing this, and then I'll get back to that question. So I'll play the rest of this piece.
within the TIF district, and once completed, create additional tax revenue for the community. The additional retail sold from the real estate can increase the sales tax revenue from the community as well. For example, the current assessed value of all properties within the proposed downtown Orland Park TIF district is $0. When the TIF district expires in 23 years, the new assessed value of the property will be approximately $45 million. TIF doesn't pull money from schools or any other taxing body. All other taxing bodies are entitled to the tax revenue they were receiving before the creation of the TIF district, and schools and other taxing bodies will receive the benefit of the tax revenue after the TIF district expires. Without the TIF district, the assessed value of all properties within the proposed downtown Orland Park TIF district will remain $0. Remember, TIF is not a new tax. Now that that's out of the way, in order to
Stop it. So basically, there's some requirements. It's got to be something, again, that can't be developed without the TIF. It has to be considered, there's a bunch of different rules, so we've looked at 3 other properties, and this is back to your question, the Andrew property, 159th, and also the John Humphrey 143rd property, as potentials for TIF. Another one that's a potential for TIF is the Sears. But we haven't looked at that yet, but I guarantee you it's qualified, because it will definitely be considered a blighted area. So the Andrew property, I think we'd all agree blighted, okay? This goes back to 2005 when, they said, well, you've been a good corporate partner, but we don't really care if you leave because you don't generate sales tax. Well, that was really short-sighted. Fortune 1000 companies don't show, headquarters, all the jobs that go back and forth because international. I mean, we've got a real estate agent, Cindy, on the board. She said, I used to do 10 houses a year just in transfers. Crystal Tree had 25 members from Andrew Corporation, right? So, not to mention, I talked to our newest member of the board, the clerk, Brian Gaspardo. He said, Orland Bakery used to do $3,000 a week in donuts to Andrew Corporation because they used to put it in every one of their conference rooms every day. $3,000, so that's $150,000 that didn't go in. So not fighting to keep them, and they wanted to go to I-80, not fighting to keep them was a colossal mistake of people that just don't understand how things work. But the property is clean to a commercial standard. It's zoned residential. Probably the highest best use is residential there. I said, hey, if you can come to us with a light industrial or something like that, we'd be willing to talk about it. Well, we had someone come to us, they've come to us with residential there. All single family homes or duplexes, so no apartments, no nothing, that's what we told them. They can do, and here's where the challenge is. So the TIF is 23 years long. If they do a normal housing at the number of units that we would accept these number of units, it's actually fairly low, there's a lot of students will come out of that. And part of the TIF law is you have to pay for those students. So if the cost of a student is $15,000, you're paying for that student out of that TIF. So a lot of students actually lowers the money you can use for the cleanup. And there's 2 things we want to do with the TIF money there. One is the cleanup, and the other is connect 151st over the train tracks and do a grade crossing there. So that way people can go, you don't have to get on the major road to go to, say, the school or go down to Pete's Market or whatever. So, and it's easier for for all of our emergency vehicles to get there. So that's the 2 things we want to use the money for. The problem they have is at the number of units, they can't make it work. To make it work, it would need a lot more units, and it would crush the schools. And so I'm very concerned about that. So what we've approached the schools with, and so far they've both said no, we're going to keep working on it. We've approached them both. Well, actually, just 135 has said no. I haven't heard from 230, though I heard there was a response. We approached them with looking to, the state legislature will extend the TIF to 35 years, which I know is a long time, but they'll extend the TIF to 35 years, but only if the school boards are on board. So we need 230 and 135 to be on board to get that 12-year extension. Then we would have more time to generate that tax revenue and pay off of those things. And the other thing it would allow us to do, it would be make it age restricted. If they make it age restricted, they can't sell the houses as fast. By making it age restricted 55 plus, there'll be very few students come out of that. We don't really have any age restricted properties, but that would work there because then the schools don't get crushed with students. We still get a nice community. There's a lot of people who are over 55, like myself, that are looking to downsize, that type of thing, that would be attracted to a community like that. And then the project could get done. So that's kind of where we're at with that. 159th Street is much closer, according to the owners of them. It's the same owners. They said they're much closer. They said they have a really great anchor, but I don't know who it is. So, but basically it's a office, residential, or office, retail, and restaurants, no residential. And the reason we would TIF that property, because part of it too is like, well, why would we TIF something just to TIF it? Well, we're TIFing it because if you think about Ravinia comes across Costco and starts to curve towards LaGrange, LaGrange at the bridal shop there, it's a really wide intersection, and everyone goes, why is this so wide? Well, it's so wide because it was actually built for a stoplight. So it's ready to go for a stoplight, but we have to pay to put that stoplight in. So that road that connects, Ravinia turns in, it's in our long-term plan, connects to LaGrange, which helps bring that traffic down, which goes to your point of the stop signs. That whole idea is that Ravinia is supposed to be that minor artery running traffic through. And so we would use the TIF money to pay for that road and to pay for that intersection. So that's the goal of, that's why we would use it. And then the John Humphrey one that we're looking at a potential TIF, that's a combination of some retail office and townhomes and condos. The reason we would use a TIF for that is that 143rd and John Humphrey was a state road. The state widened it. As part of the state widening, it's a non-numbered road, so the village took jurisdiction of it, which means we're on the hook for it. Well, they tried a new technique for that intersection, using styrofoam for land bridges. It's failing. So it's about a $10 million project. So much better to have a development pay for that than to pay $10 million out of our property tax bills, right? So that's why we would consider a TIF there. All of this is being done for good reason. All three of those have been looked at. They all qualify. And the developer has put in escrow money to pay for all of the studies required if we were ever to put a TIF in place. But if a TIF was going to go in place, and you're going to hear a lot of crap about how we've put it in place, we've done this, we have not. It requires public hearings. So there's at least 2, but it might be 3 or 4 meetings that we have to discuss it, and a public hearing for people to come talk about it, all of that, you have to do that. We're not at that point yet, because ultimately we don't want to put the TIF in until the project is basically ready to go. Because we don't want to have what happened with the Triangle, which is they put a TIF in, they used the money to buy out businesses, no one had control of the properties. It took them almost 8 years to get control of the property. Well, that's 8 years where you don't have any money coming in. So we don't want to do that. We're not going to repeat those mistakes.
So earlier you mentioned the $82 million in debt, 47 plus whatever.
Yeah, I think we're 83 and a half, yeah.
Okay, well, whatever. Just being a numbers person, what type of timeline do you think it will take to pay off the?
So as most of us, I think most of us would understand, there's good uses for debt and bad uses for debt, right? Pretty much how many people here own a home, right? Have a mortgage, okay? That's a good use of debt, right? You've got a permanent asset, get a place to live. You know, some people, most of us don't pay cash for our cars, right? So there's good uses for debt. Triangle, not so good, okay? We also borrowed over the years, if you remember the rebates, every year we had a rebate, we borrowed the money for it. That's like paying your ComEd bill with a credit card, right? This is not smart, okay? But what's good to use debt? So when I got here, we had 110 million of debt. Now we have 83, okay? So that 83, most of those bonds are 20 years or less, but they'll also be, for some of the capital infrastructure, there may be some additional debt, that comes on. But again, we borrow at such a low rate. Like, for example, it was down to like 60, but we put $22 million worth of debt on to do Schuessler Park and to do the concert venue, because we knew we have a lot of debt capacity with what we bring in. We have a lot of debt capacity. Not that we want to use it all, but if we have projects like that, like the firing range, like those things, typically you're not going to have $20 million laying around to do that, right? So, but those bonds were refinanced. I think I saw somebody say, well, I've added all this debt since I've been here. Well, that's because, and they pointed to all the bonds we put in. We refinanced all the bonds we had. So yeah, we incurred debt to pay off the debt because it never occurred to my predecessor to restructure the debt when the interest rates had gone down so much. So we basically got them at a lower rate. We're saving about $2 million a year in interest. So we restructured everything in 21 and 22. So, and we also borrowed for 2 years early or a year and a half early for the Schuschler. It wasn't all borrowing, but Schuschler, Centennial Park West, and some of our other capital projects, we actually borrowed early because we saw a rising interest rate future. So we borrowed it a year and a half earlier than we needed it, and it saved us another probably $1 million or $2 million a year, because instead of hitting, right now it's about 1.5 points higher than what it was.
I misstated that question. I really meant to focus on more like the 47 million. I understand two projects,
Right.
47 were stuck. So is there like a timeline?
Well, those were restructured in 2021, and most of those are 20-year notes, so they were restructured and made longer, so that, because obviously doing that at a low interest rate, at 2% interest rate, allows us to do more of our local road program and stuff like that, rather than eating up with interest and debt payments. We're able to do it and pay for it that year. So, but yes. I think the terms are 20 years on the bonds.
Whatever happened with the library? I remember, they were building the library, it was like a $20-some million.
Yeah, so the library is not part of the village anymore. They split it off when they did that, which I don't necessarily think we needed another governmental unit. Because now, they used to be 27% of the village's levy. Now they're 55% of our levy. So, so and I'm not so sure that was a great idea. I think their bond for that was paid off 2 years ago. So that's no longer levied, but their levy still hasn't changed much. So it's their levy went up 4.25% this year. Ours went down 1%. Last year's went up 4.5%. Ours went down 3%. They're at about 55% for one building. We levy about 13.3 million. They levy 7 million for one building. So now we do have other revenue sources to operate the whole village, but that's still a lot of money for one building. So, hi. Yeah, so they're online. So on the website, I think it's under transparency or finance department, and it'll have the financial audits. And I think before you came in, we talked about the audit. The 22 audit numbers are in there. The 2023 probably will be in there in March. And the budget will be posted too once it's finalized. So the budgets are all posted.
Is there any interest in the space of the furniture store by Trader Joe that's closing?
So there's a space by Trader Joe's that's closing. I think when things like that close, it takes a while for that to kind of filter through the market usually. But the village itself, we don't do the leasing. So it's the landowners and things. So sometimes those landowners already have someone lined up. We haven't heard about it. Sometimes it sits vacant for a while they put it out on the market. Once it's out on the marketplace, we list it along with other things. Bigger spaces are harder to fill. Obviously, we had Bed Bath & Beyond and Steinmart were both empty for probably a year and a half, 2 years before Steinhoffels came along, and then took them both, and they did a fantastic. The space is amazing. They opened up some light, natural. It's really. Thank you very much for coming. Have a Merry Christmas. But yeah, so I always say when it comes to, it's like, well, why isn't the village getting something leased here, put into this strip or put into that? Like, that's not our job, right? And frankly, we're lucky. Like Payless the Payless Park has to call people to try and get them into places. Every retailer, every restaurant, they know where Orland Park is. If they want to come here, we're on their radar already. They're looking for the right space to be in for the size, for the location. They're looking for the space that fits their needs, right? So our job really is to create an environment by which those places want to be here. And as you're, Seasons 52 already #1 in dining and diners and reservations in the whole region, the whole Midwest region. They've only been here for 5 weeks or 6 weeks. So, and he said the day they opened, the guy who's running the store, who's an Orland Park resident, said he goes, the restaurant's too small. I wish it was 20% bigger. He said, I know it's too small, but it's great, it's beautiful. And so there's a lot of places that want to be here. And, we help create the environment to get them here. We also have an incentive program for, I think, everything over 20,000, it's either 10 or 20,000 square feet, that for any vacancy because we know the big places are hard to fill, and there's not a lot of tenants, and we have most of them in town already. So anyone who comes from, that's not here already, we wouldn't give an incentive to Hobby Lobby to move to another place, okay? But anyone who comes here to one of those large spaces, we have a standing incentive plan to share 50% of sales tax over a 10-year period, up to 25% of their capital costs to build. So that's the cap. So, because if it sits vacant, we get nothing. So it's kind of a win-win. You get an incentive, but it's based on what you sell and the property tax revenue you generate. So, so we do that for anything that's large like that space. Any other questions?
If we award, is Orland going to get money back that Susan Mendoza?
So, to my knowledge, they haven't held anything back, actually held anything back yet. I don't know. I mean, she's busy. She's facing federal charges right now based on what I saw this week on the trial with the Madigan stuff. So who knows what's going on with her. But that was purely political. I mean, there's 500. So 2023, she's withholding money. We're late on our 2023 audit. I told you we're late by a week right now on our 2023 audit. And she's withholding money that's ours. So the money she's withholding is they collect. If people don't pay their parking tickets or they don't pay their fines or whatever, we can give them over to the state, and the state can take it from their income tax return, okay, and give it to us. We collect about $100,000 a year that way, so it's not a huge number for us. It's interesting that nobody else who is only late for their 2023 audit is having anything withheld, just us. And there's 520 other units of government that have, their audits are late. But the best part of all of that is the comptroller's office audit is late for 2023, and their fiscal year ended June 30th, 6 months before ours. So they're 6 months later than we are, and she's busy telling us that you're gonna, come on. I mean, everyone knows, here's the bottom line. She announced that, 10 minutes later, my opponent announced and made audits his big thing. Does anybody see a coincidence there? Just a little coinky-dink? Yeah. So, I've been at this long enough to know what's happening here, right? It's a political action, and, ultimately we've asked the state legislature to provide relief because the comptroller shouldn't be behaving in that manner. And she actually does not have according to the Illinois Municipal League, who has written a letter on our behalf, she doesn't actually even have the legal right to do it. So, but she also said she's fined us. We've never been fined. So I don't know if our money's actually been withheld yet because our payments are 3 months in arrears. So we'll see, But at the end of the day, we will get it eventually. And, we have between our capital and our operating, we have over $100 million budget. So $100,000 is not breaking us. We have a pretty healthy reserve. I think our reserves are like 25 million, so we'll be all right. But so now you have a question.
Okay, further information. You talk about TIFs and infrastructure. What money was used to build that parking garage?
What money was used to use the parking garage? I believe that that was a deal cut with University of Chicago. So I think University of Chicago actually paid to build the parking garage.
So why didn't they get a walkway from the garage to the...
It actually has the ability to make a walkway. Both buildings have the required stuff to connect. So that is in there for the future if they want it. But
I paid for a parking garage, I want a walkway.
You know what? I'm not University of Chicago, so I can't. I don't know why they didn't do it. But it is prepared. I do know that the DEC and University of Chicago both the buildings are prepared to receive a walkway. So they don't have to do anything to the buildings, they just have to put the walkway in if they did decide to do that at some point. But the garage is not that heavily used yet, so, right, so yeah.
Any long-term plans, to repave the road from Harlem to Grange on 143rd Street, since the village now owns those roads.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of our long-term plans, I'm sure, but for a road like that or like 151st, we generally look for, so we get what they call STP dollars, so transportation dollars from the state that go to the, they actually go get divvied out to the Conference of Mayors. Our conference is the Southwest Conference of Mayors. And so we get money every year for various projects based on prioritization across all of the towns in Southwest Conference. And we definitely get our share. I mean, you know, we're not competing with, you know, for the Southwest Conference of Mayors, to my knowledge, there's none of these things are based on equity and all this. It's just truly road needs that is done. And it's also matching ability. So we have the ability to match a lot. And some of these other places, it takes them a while to get the money they need to match. And they don't have as big of towns either. So we get our fair share of STP dollars to do that. But I don't think 143rd is in the next couple of years. There's other roads that are like 153rd, like 151st are a little bit.
I mean, people know, they know at what point that road is.
Yeah, well, we know. It's not lost on us that the roads need to get repaired. We measure our roads 2018, and then in 2022, we measured them again, and they go through and measure every bit of the roads. Chris, while I'm talking about other stuff, can you pull up the map that shows the red, green, yellow, blue? Do you have that? But anyways, we measure them all and rate them all, and that's how we determine what needs to get done. So Public Works has a plan on all. Public Works and Engineering both have plans on all of that.
Orland Park Play has a very good system for stormwater management, like all the basins. You know, it's,
Yeah, like 350 of them.
right, I think they're doing a good job. But at some point in the future, with all these rains we're getting, I don't think they're gonna be adequate. We had one storm, I don't know if you were there, where the basin flooded the 7-Eleven at 150 First Street, you got a foot of water, because it overflowed the.
Well, it didn't happen during my tenure.
No, okay, but it overflowed the retention basin for the mall, and about a foot of water went into that strip mall.
So it didn't happen during my tenure. So I don't know about that. But so regarding stormwater, so MWRD, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, is responsible for that. They've actually made the rules much more difficult for development. Made it very challenging for development. Before I go deeper into that, that's the road condition survey, so 2018 and 2023. So you can see 2018 on the left, and blue is 81 to 100, that's considered very good. 61 to 80, 41 to 60 is fair, 21 to 40 is poor, 0 to 20 is very poor. We had 40% of our roads were poor or very poor in 2018. Now that's down to 17%. And you can see how much more blue there is. So we've been making huge strides on our local roads. And then our major arteries like 143rd, 151st, we have long-term plans for those as well. So, and we always seek to get money from other places on that. Regarding stormwater, so MWRD has these rules, and it's become very challenging because they actually, a couple of years ago, they changed the rules to add more, basically new rainwater estimates that were much, much higher. So it made developments much harder to do because of that. The mall itself, that's one of the reasons we would TIF Sears, because currently, with all the parking lot there, they are at capacity with stormwater. So anything that is built there, that's why Portillo's was such a great project, because it's a small building and they could actually put the stormwater on that small property. It's very hard to build something and have enough room to put the stormwater. And so it's very expensive to put stormwater underground, which is pretty much what they have to do. So the Sears, one of the reasons we would TIF that is because we would probably take that parking lot area, and a large section of that parking lot would become a detention pond. So it would green up the space a lot, which would be good. And they don't need all that parking. And it would provide water storage for the outlots that aren't developed yet. So that's part of the goal. So, so that's something we're aware of and we deal with on every project. We don't really have any flooding issues that I'm aware of. Maybe one here or there, but you know, you've got Wolf Road, you've got 143rd Street. Those are both IDOT roads, and actually the IDOT projects that were put in place would fix those if IDOT would ever do the projects. So, and Southwest Highway's being done, and that's going to take care of that problem there. But although we've kind of taken care of it already by fixing some culvert issues and things that we identified, our engineering actually did IDOT's work and came up with a solution to those problems. So, any other questions? Still got time, so. No questions on the parks or any of that stuff. So anybody who's not been to Schuessler, please go take a look. And the sledding hill is ready to go. I was up by there the other day, so that looks great. Schuessler's at 88th Avenue behind Ravinia, or behind Riviera, along the golf course. So it was our biggest park before John Humphrey was built in like 1990 or whatever it was, and then later, Centennial Park West was built, I think, or Centennial Park was built in like 1992. So those two things were built like right about at the same time. So, and then, so this is what Schuessler Park looks like. Schuessler Park will have a all-abilities playground going in next year. The police training facility, you can drive by there, it's under construction. The Veterans Center has been moved. The building looks fantastic. And also on West Avenue, there's a new memorial. There was a memorial for Ronald Zinn at the old one. Ronald Zinn was a lieutenant, academy graduate that died, and he was also supposed to be an Olympian as well, and he died in Vietnam. And the memorial at the old building was just for him. We expanded the memorial to the other two people who were killed in Vietnam. So there's a nice memorial there. That was put in place as well. Over here, Dugan Park will start next year and be built next year. So Dugan Park's going to add 10 pickleball courts, expand this parking lot. So it's a conceptual plan on this. So that's going to start next year. The reason we moved it up a year is because we got a $600,000 grant to do that. So we don't want to lose that money. Anytime we find outside money, we use it. So prior to my arrival, I think looking back like 6 years, we'd gotten $2.5 million in grants. I think since I've been here, we've gotten $44 million in grants. We've taken a big effort to get grant money because if we can get the state or the federal government to put money towards it, we want to roll those projects forward and get them done so that we're not on the hook to do the whole thing. This is the downtown triangle. So this is the park currently. Their plan is to expand the park and make it bigger. So, and as part of what they're planning on doing. And it will include so this will be in the winter will be ice skating. So we will, when that opens, we will close our other ice skating rink, which is very expensive to operate and pretty isolated. This way you'll have an ice skating rink and there'll be shops and things over here and things for people to do. So, and there's gonna be a Heroes Park is what it's gonna be called. So we have that going on. That'll be one of the first things that goes in there because it's going to be part of the infrastructure that they do. I'm trying to think what else we have going on. The budget will get approved at the next board meeting. The levy will be finally approved at the next board meeting. And when I say finally approved, basically, I just mean final approval. So what we've passed so far, it can't be higher than. We could still lower it if the budget works out where we can still lower it a little bit more. We could still potentially do that.
What's happening with the property on Grange Road and the train tracks, like the other side of the train tracks? I think it's supposed to be a nature center.
Oh, the nature center that we spent about $3.2 million on that. When I got here, it was a project, I actually didn't think it was a very good use of money, but I wasn't going to win that battle, so I voted for it as well. I was the last guy to vote. It was already 6-0, so there's no point because I don't think it's not very highly used. The wetland property was donated to us, open land, so we have an agreement with the Forest Preserve to swap that property and it would turn into forest preserve, so it still stays open lands. The nice thing is then we wouldn't be on the hook for maintaining it all, which is, that we don't really have the expertise to maintain a wetland and a nature, and the natural areas we created, but it's right up the Forest Preserves alley. And in exchange for that, we're getting, for 143rd Street widening, we're getting additional easement given to us, and we're also getting a right-of-way along Park School to the west of it, so that West Avenue can be expanded, so that so that buses can come in from the west side, as opposed to through that mess on the east side, like it has since I've been a kid. And then also they're waiving some tree mitigation fees. I mean, at the end of the day, they're getting a lot of value and we're getting a little bit, but it's good government. That swap's supposed to happen by the end of the year. I think we're having, this idea was talked about 7 years ago. It seems like the biggest, easiest, no-brainer, good government thing ever. Dealing with the forest preserves is a nightmare. It's like never enough. And I finally had told them, I said, then we'll walk away, we'll keep maintaining it. Because for the 143rd Street widening, they wanted us to take all the capacity for flooding capacity from McGinnis Slough and all that. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Like, all we want to do is swap this little piece for that big piece. You're getting a great piece of property, you know, but for some reason they felt like they had us over a barrel. It's like, no, I don't care that much, other than this is good government.
Didn't we get something, did the village get something for the 135th Street and Wolf Road from the Forest Preserve?
Nothing that I know of. The Forest Preserve doesn't give up anything.
Well, I understood there was some private property there that the village gave to the Forest Preserve and to get right away along 143rd.
Maybe back in the day, it's possible. Yeah, it's possible. But the right-of-way that we have right-of-way there, or we have an easement there. What we're trying to turn it into right-of-way and expand it because it gives us more room to work. So I think it's like 15 feet bigger. So it's a little bit more. Our alternative is, and we've told Forest Preserve, well, if you'd rather deal with IDOT when they go to widen it, then you can do that. Because I don't think they want to deal with IDOT either. So hopefully it'll get done. I mean, I know that the reasonable people in the room want to get it done. There's always something political. There's always some attorney. This is just common sense. It's good government. They know how to maintain this stuff. We don't, right? So as a former village manager said to me, he said, just to not have to pay the 150 or 200 grand a year to maintain it is a good thing, right? So because the Forest Preserve has the capabilities in-house to maintain that stuff. So, any other questions?
I got one again.
Okay, you and Don.
Yeah. 159th and 104th Avenue, that light there, I know that's IDOT. Because I've tried to contact them. Because before that section east of 150 or 104th Avenue was rebuilt, the light, you know, if you want to turn on south on 104th Avenue, if there was nobody coming from the east or from the west, you would get the arrow to turn. Now, since that portion was rebuilt, the light has changed. So the turning lane, you sit there
Yeah,
and wait.
I'm not a traffic engineering expert, but that is an IDOT thing, and all of those lights are synced. So I'm not sure the reason. I know that I do believe there's an actual data and factual reason for it, and it's based on traffics and speeds and all of those types of things. I'm sure it's a safety issue versus sitting for a couple minutes versus having people taking left turns when maybe they shouldn't, and or stopping the flow of traffic coming into town. So.
There are towns that have left turn lanes, and you make that turn if there's no traffic coming.
We have places that are like that too. And we have places like that we don't have problems, and we have other places like that are highest crash intersections in town. So it's all based on how the light was initially put in way back when, and also what the traffic and the intersection is now. We're studying 159th and 94th Avenue because it's our highest. It was our highest. It's not anymore. It's like third or fourth. by putting the speed camera there, or not the speed, the red light camera there, it has reduced the number of accidents, but it's still a bad intersection. So we're doing a study right now to see what's the better option for how to set up that intersection to both move traffic more safely and more quickly. So.
Yeah, it's not, that intersection light is not in sync with the one that goes in the wall. You always did that long back.
In sync with the one at Walmart, going into Walmart.
Going in, you know, where,
Oh, well, yeah, so I'm not sure if those are interconnected, but I do know from LaGrange to 355, they're all interconnected. So, but yeah, we know that that's a problem. It's budgeted next year to study it, so. We do collect from them. Updating them, I don't know that we're responsible for that. But I can tell you that there's probably not a big plan. If we are, there's probably not a big plan to do it because we got other things to spend. But I really do not know. So I believe the boxes themselves, that Metro is involved in. Anything that, Metro would be involved in it no matter what, which is not an easy task to get anything done or changed at Metro. So, but I don't know if that's where that's at in the priority. But regarding those boxes, I've never seen it on our capital plan, so it's probably a Metro-related issue. But we do collect it.
Yeah, because you try to put money in some of those boxes, if it doesn't register, you use your money and then you pay the price.
Well, so definitely report that through our 311 system, and we'll at least get it to the right people. If we can't do it, if we don't fix them and repair them, we'll get someone out there to do it. So, but back to what I said earlier, we're a complaint-driven. For the most part, we're complaint-driven on those types of things. We just don't have eyes on everything that goes on. So if we know about it, we'll address it. Bonnie, who's my assistant, she deals with a lot of emails, and she gets it to the right people, and she deals with even more phone calls that come into the office, and she gets them to the right people and gets things handled. So, but we do have a 311 system, and you can report it that way.
Do you think the sportsplex will ever accept silver sneakers?
Nope,
Why?
because it's very costly, and we end up we pay more money to be part of that program, and we already subsidize Sportsplex, about 50% of Sportsplex's operating costs. So, been asked this question many times, so I'm pretty familiar with it. And basically, we subsidize Sportsplex already, and the senior rates are lower at Sportsplex than other rates. But we unlike Orland Health and Fitness, is not subsidized operationally. So you're paying so it pays for itself, and the rates there are, I think, about 50% higher than they are at Sportsplex. But we subsidize Sportsplex. We subsidize all of our rec programs. It's part of the village policy. We subsidize them 52%. And I hear, Tinley Park Park District has silver sneakers. Tinley Park Park District is a separate taxing body. Tinley Park, if you added Tinley Park District and Tinley Park's property taxes, they're 4 times what Orland Parks are. So in order to offer silver sneakers, we're going to raise property taxes by about 10%. So we're not going to do that. We have no park district.
Okay, so like when we get the brochure for all the programs.
That's Village of Orland Park Parks and Recreation. And so this is back to the confusing Illinois government system. There are towns that have park districts. Tinley Park has a park district. It's a separate taxing body. The properties they own are separate. They tax you separately. It's run separately. The village has nothing to do with it. In the Village of Orland Park, our recreation program is part of the Village of Orland Park. So Village of Orland Park taxes pay for the 66 parks we have, all of our recreation programs. All of that is run by the village. It's not a separate district. Okay? Yeah, that's part of the village. The Cultural Arts Center, yeah. Well, Bonnie can address that. Bonnie can address that. She'll follow up. Because we have a maintenance contract. Well, we have a service that's responsible for it, so she'll contact our Public Works and they'll keep an eye on it. So, yeah.
I imagine on the triangle, the first thing that's gonna happen is the moving of the utilities.
Moving of utilities is gonna start probably in March.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because, I said, and actually our engineer said, well, we're waiting to hear from the developer about where the buildings are gonna go and all that. I'm like, okay, do we really need to hear from the developer? I said, do you know where it's gonna go? He goes, well, yeah, we pretty much know where they're gonna have to go. I said, then move them, right? So at least get that moving, because again, we want buildings there that are on the tax roll, that are part of that TIF. We want them done so that they're assessed, so that they're paying taxes that go into that TIF. We want that as fast as possible, because the faster you get that, the more money that comes into the TIF to pay for all the infrastructure.
Do all TIFs start the same length of time?
No, but most TIFs are made, 23 years is the max. Usually they do them at 23 years. You can always stop them early, so why wouldn't you do them 23 years? Because once it's paid for everything though, if it's done really well, in this, the triangle one, it's fairly tight. I mean, I think the 159th one won't be. That one will generate probably pretty quickly. This one's pretty tight and will need the 23 years probably. And one of the things about being tight is there's a little bit more risk involved. And one of the things we're doing as part of the risk that they didn't do the first time, they spent $150 million on that, right? And they spent a lot early on, buying out businesses and all that. What we're doing is we're actually taking out and you have to take out debt to do that. We're gonna take out the debt in tranches. That's the plan. So that if for whatever reason you have COVID, or you have a 9/11, or you have something that's just weird that happens, that the market just gets crushed, we're not extended and haven't built all of this stuff. I mean, they built all this infrastructure, that whole triangle, they built all that infrastructure with no plan. Well, the developer's like, well, I'm kind of stuck now. All of my ideas, all of the things I can do, I can't do, because you've made the road grid, right? A typical developer, they want to develop and put the road grid around their development. And we didn't really let that happen. It's strangled us.
Yeah, they want a blank canvas.
Correct. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And they've made it hard. So
the power lines are in the wrong place, are the sewer lines in the wrong place?
It's the sewer lines that are in the wrong. Sewer and water. They're across the middle of they're middle of this. So we're moving it to run along that. Like is typical. But that's a $3.5 million cost. So it's frustrating, right? It's frustrating to Joni, it's frustrating to me, because it's not something, it's a problem we inherited. It's like, okay, now we're stuck fixing this. And how many of these have happened, Joni, in 3.5 years where it's like, again? I mean, we just keep uncovering more and more stuff. It's 2 million, it's 3 million. I'm like, I think we're getting to the end of it. I think we've identified it all, but it's a lot. And things like, you talk about water, and roads. I showed you the picture of the roads. I mean, you can put them back up. So you see in 2018 what they look like, okay? That's because we spent $100 million on this whole thing, putting roads in. We could have spent that money on keeping those roads so that they look like the one on the right. And we doubled in 2019, we went from $4 million a year to $8 million. And we did $8 million until through last year, to get the roads to look like that. Now we're down to 6 because we're gonna basically get, our average rating back in 2018 was 48. We got it up to 58 last year. By the time we go do the next one, we should be at 68, which 70 is considered best in class. So that's basically, you can see what it's gonna look like by spending $6 million a year going forward. But this is what you see on the left was what the plan was when I got here. It was basically to keep them pretty much in the same spot, that the orange and yellow would have actually gotten worse, or orange and red. So we've been able to pretty much eliminate everything that's in very poor condition. And and the poor condition is down under 20%. So we've, that's the goal. So, and so the whole idea is to have a regular, get yourself to where you can regularly maintain it at a lower level of spend. But if you ignore it for 10 years, which is what we did, and underspend to do this, then you end up with all this stuff you have to do, and it's more expensive to do because the roads are in worse condition and all that kind of stuff. It was the same thing with our parks. We had done 10 parks out of our last, 10 parks in the one park every other year. So I think we'd done, in the previous 16 years, we'd done 8 parks, okay? One every other year. We have 66 parks. One every other year is 132 years to get through your parks. None of us are experts on parks, but I think we all know that 132 years, the park isn't gonna look very good if you haven't got in there and redone it, right? So that's what it looked like prior to getting here. In the since 2019, since the new board came on and I finally had the votes, we have redone 32 neighborhood parks. We've done John Humphrey, Schuschler, Centennial Park West in 5 years. And as you can see here, you can see all the pavilions, all the major renovations, the basketball courts. We've done 23 basketball courts in that time. Tennis and pickleball courts, we've done 17 of them. Bocce ball courts, we've done, I think, all of them, like 11 of them. So, we added some batting cages to a few of them. We did all of that in 4 years after all of that neglect for so long. But now we're to a point where next year I think we're doing 3, and the next year we're gonna be doing 2 parks a year. And some years it'll be 3, but that pretty much will keep us on a steadier state that we can, and so it's obviously much cheaper. So there's a lot of money that we've had to spend. And you can see the picture of where the parks have been done, because we always hear that, oh, you spend money on this side of town because they have nicer homes. They'll say, we have nicer homes, we pay more taxes, you spend money on that part of town because, it's like, no, we spend money where, based on what's in the worst shape. And so you can see it kind of goes everywhere. So, but that's what we've done with our parks. So, and including this year, like I said, it's 32 parks plus the 3, plus the 3 big renovations, Schuschler Park, John Humphrey right over here, and then Centennial Park West. So, but again, those things why were they neglected? They were neglected because the money was getting diverted to that project at 143rd LaGrange. So, and it's frustrating for the board, it's frustrating for Joni when we have to keep seeing these things, that we have to keep figuring out a way to manage to pay for or fix. So, but with all that said, we're in a great position. What we've accomplished over the last 6 years to get us in this place with our capital, with our parks, with our roads, has been truly outstanding work by the staff, by our board to commit to getting it done. Because if your roads crumble, your infrastructure crumbles, your town crumbles around it. Anything else? Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. Have a Merry Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, have a happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, and be safe and stay warm. I'm going to be in Arizona for a week, so again, thank you for coming. Thank you for the good questions. I know that a lot of you have been here before, and so you hear a lot of the same things over and over again. But hopefully there were a few new things in there as well, and hopefully it was informative about what's going on in the village. So, thank you.
Thank you.